Hi all, this is Maria Clark at Sweet Willow Designs and welcome to my studio. Today's project is to do dot painting, a mandala dot painting on this globe. I found this at my local craft store and I have been thinking about our world a lot lately with all the events, and I thought this would be a good project to decorate this globe. So you can see that it's got a nice neutral palette. It's got some golds and some greens and some beiges, and I thought it would make a nice background. So when you look for one of these globes, you want to make sure that you can actually get the globe piece off. Otherwise it's impossible really to dot on it without a lot of struggle. This one has two ends that just screw off, and then the center rod just pulls out. So kind of test it out while you're in the store. Make sure you think you can get that rod out, and then it's just a matter of unscrewing it and pulling it through. This particular one came with two metal caps, and I'm going to go ahead and use those caps, but I noticed that they were a little bit loose, so in the end I think I'll glue them down so there's a little bit more stability and security when they go back together. So using one of those little metal pieces, I'm going to just dry fit one on and draw around it so that I can create my first my first grid mark. Now this particular globe, and most of them I think that you'll find, have a sort of a grid on them. You can see here the grid marks. This one's not perfectly lined up. This is a really inexpensive one that I got at the craft store, but you could probably find them at thrift stores and things like that. So they're not necessarily perfectly lined up, but there's a good grid on them so that you can get a good idea as to where to place your dots. And I'm using this particular bowl. This is actually a plastic planter, and I've just put some of that that grippy shelf liner on to keep it stable, and this worked out well. But look around and see what you've got. You could use a duct tape roll, and that has a center that could work. I'm going to primarily use 3 colors of paint, which I'll note below, and I'm starting with my G6 4mm crochet hook and this Festive Green, and I'll just go ahead and dot all the way around, and I think I end up with about 24 dots around. Now this is going to go fast because it's very, very repetitive, and so the dotting is actually very, very simple. I wanted it to be simple so that I could keep the globe on the map showing through. So I've actually end up doing 5 rows with my G6, and then I'll move into my next size up, the H8 5mm crochet hook, and I'll do a couple of rows of that. I moved up to my I9 5.5 and did a couple of rows, and then into my J10 6mm for a couple of rows. Now I'm moving into the K 10.5 6.5mm for a couple of rows, and you can see that this is really simple. So this is a good project for a new daughter who's just learning basic skills, because it's not an overly complex design. Now I've put a row of the L11 8mm, and I'm using my largest nail dotter to do one set of walking the dots around around that row. And then I'm going back in with the same L11 8mm, and I'll put another row, and here I'm going to walk another set of dots, but this time I'm going to do 2 rows of walk the dots. So you can see that I'm just going around, and here I am going to put my second row, and you'll see as I move that globe around, you'll be able to see that there are 2 rows there. And you can see that second row starting to emerge. I think it's really nice to be able to do some dotting on an object, and I've been wanting to do something on a map. I really have been thinking lately of the planet and peace and the world, and really was a nice meditative process to do this particular dot. Now I've moved up to the 9mm M13 crochet hook and placed a row, and I'm using my G6 4mm to put those 3 crown dots, and then my largest nail dotter to walk the dots around. Now you'll notice that my hand is touching those dots, so I've obviously let this dry because it's really, you know, easier, I think, if you let it dry to go ahead and get those dots walked. I finished that row off by using my largest nail dotter to just dot 3 down. You can see that there, and I'm using and introduced a 4th color, which is this berry color, to do the top dots, and I thought that was a pretty contrast with the green. And then I'm showing you that I turned it and did the exact same pattern on the opposite end of the globe in this blue color, and I'll have, of course, all those colors below, and then I top dotted it with that same berry color, so it's the exact same design. And then I thought, well, I will do something around the equator. So I took that berry color and just dotted all the way around. I think it's like 120 dots. And then I'm alternating the green and the blue and pretty much repeating that pattern that I used previously, but just in a smaller scale, using the G6 4mm and my nail dotter to make those crown dots and then dot up from there. And you can see then that I've placed the blue, and I want you to notice that they're alternating. That's just the pattern I chose. You could do it however you wanted, of course, but I've just alternated them so the green and the blue are offset by 1 row. That's what the blue looks like completed. I thought that turned out very pretty. And then as I move around, you can see the equator in that pattern. And then as I move that around, you can see the green. And I think it'll make a nice simple decoration. Here's a close-up. I did go in and add another row of, another layer of top dots with gold. And that really enhanced the overall look. Now to put this back together, it's pretty simple. I just took some super glue and put some glue on there because I wanted the extra stability. So I've just put a little bit of super glue and pressed on that metal cap, centered it, and now I'm ready to reassemble the globe. And again, it's just a matter of unscrewing the knobs off that rod and placing the rod through and screwing the whole thing back together essentially. And there's the completed piece. I really like the way it turned out. Here's another close-up of the top dots, a final pattern. And here's the piece on its stand. I hope you enjoyed this project. I want to thank you for joining me in my studio. I want to thank you again for watching and for subscribing, for leaving me a comment. I really appreciate it. I thought this was a really nice project to kind of meditate on the world and in the universe and the world we live in. Thanks again for joining me in my studio. Take care.